Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is James Wilmot, and welcome to Forum Europe's 9th annual European Cybersecurity Conference, this year held in a hybrid format, and indeed this year also organised in close partnership with our colleagues at EXO, the European Cybersecurity Organisation, with whom we've collaborated once again and have enjoyed that collaboration, and thanks to Luigi and Sarah for your support for this edition. It's my job to be brief so that we can get to the main event, but I wanted to provide you with a few practical details and then to offer some additional thanks and appreciation. So firstly, and don't groan at this, but firstly, the internet network was Ton Hotel, but there's no password. The hashtag for the event is EU CyberSec, so do get involved in the conversation there. To the 700 or so attending online, great to have you with us also. And you should see the chat function for those online on the right of your screen, and this is where during the course of the day you can post your questions and comments, and these will be passed to the moderators for the respective sessions as we move forward. For those of you in the room, it's obviously quite the novelty to have face-to-face interaction, so we should make the most of it. So if you have a question, I'm sure you'll remember this, but you can put your hand up and we'll bring you a microphone at the appropriate time. We have fresh air coming through the windows in the roof. We've also got the air conditioning for some additional relief, but of course, while there are no formal restrictions, if you want to use your mask and there's plenty of hand sanitizer, then of course please do. Thank you to this year's conference. There we go. Yeah, so thank you to this year's conference sponsors. So in alphabetical order, Accenture, Broadcom, BSA, the Software Alliance, Cloudflare, Norton Life Rock, Sectra, Usercentrics, Vodafone, and Trudexia. We couldn't be doing it without them, so much appreciated. It's obviously a big day in Brussels today, and events in Ukraine are no doubt in all of our minds. So from all of the team here, I wanted again to put on record our thanks for all of you taking the time to be with us, both in Brussels and online, and to our speakers across the day, including Vice President Skinas and Executive Director Lepasar, who no doubt have many important commitments across the day. So thank you for being with us. And then finally, if you need anything from either myself or any of the team, this is a good start. Just let us know. We're here to help. And with that, I'll hand the floor to Paul Adamson, Forum Europe's chairman, to kick proceedings off. So thank you very much. Oh, I don't need applause.
Yes, you do. Am I on? Yes. Good morning, everybody. Yes, and with James, I'd like to welcome you all here to this conference. We're very grateful you made the time to come here. It's a busy time in Brussels, not just for world leaders, but also for all of you. So we appreciate the fact that you made the time. This morning I have a very simple but extremely pleasant task, which is to introduce our keynote speaker, Margaritis Schinas, Vice President of the European Commission. His official title is Vice President Promoting Our European Way of Life, but I think you should change that, Margaritis, to Vice President for all the major challenges facing the European Union, because that seems to be what every single day of your life now seems to be devoted to dealing with and taking a lead on Europe's major challenges. Margaritis will give some prepared remarks, as you're all expecting from the program. He's promised to stay a few minutes before he has to disappear to even more pressing commitments. So I have lots of questions, but if anybody here in the room may be less so easily to organize online, but anybody in the room has a quick question to ask Margaritis afterwards, start thinking about it now. If you haven't got any questions, which is often the case, you're just in awe of the keynote speaker, I promise you I have a couple of questions to ask Margaritis before he goes. I think without further ado from me, Margaritis, over to you, and thank you again, sir, for being with us this morning.
That's nice to get an applause before even one starts talking. Thank you for having me here. In August, September 2019, when President von der Leyen called me to interview me and give me my portfolio responsibilities, she told me, I have something for you which is new. You will be doing security, mobility, opportunities. In practice, you will be in charge of the most anthropocentric portfolio of my team. People will do money, services, tariffs. You will do people. You will deal with people. What she didn't tell me is that dealing with people is mainly switching from one major crisis to the other, because the things that we've been dealing with in this commission are closer to a science fiction scenario, a Hollywood blockbuster, a pandemic, a war, and a sequence of very demanding challenges. So I appreciate the fact that we have some time now this morning on a difficult day for Brussels, but still a very productive day, I think, because with many important people on town, including the President of the United States, to find some time to discuss calmly the bigger picture. And of course, security is at the heart of the challenges we're facing now. I remember, Paul, a year and a half ago when you invited me to the European Security Summit to present our new thinking of our new EU Security Union strategy. That was a vision that we had in this commission to structure our security policies under one single roof and build under this roof the different chambers that would have to be all interlinked for the house to make sense. So when it comes to security, homeland, as our American friends call it, all the different chambers and the corridors need to make sense. And this is a problem we had in Europe because for many, many years, our security policies were structured in a way that didn't make much sense, in a way that was connecting them to vertical constituencies and policy fiefdoms. We had lots of fragmentation, many silos. So in this commission, we're determined to sort of move beyond the verticality and the barriers of these policy constituencies, of these silos, to this single roof house of the Security Union strategy. So 1.5 years ago, when we're discussing our vision for a Security Union, we could not imagine that today we would be in a situation where war would have returned in Europe on the doorstep of our union. We could not imagine that the principles on which we build our security architecture and which we considered inviolable will be trampled upon by a cynical and ruthless attack that strikes indiscriminately at military and civilians alike. And in addition to the invasion and mortar fire and bombing, comes the more insidious but still highly destructive threat of a cyber invasion. Yes, a cyber warfare is ongoing in our neighborhood. Look at the waves of cyber attacks that hits Ukraine's critical public and private entities in the weeks and days before the invasion, and which intensified when the war broke out. Ministries, armed forces, banks, border crossing points, stations were all targeted with a very calculated and deliberate aim to paralyzing the country, even before a shot being fired at minimal cost by an enemy whose face we cannot see. This is the reality of today's world. And this is what our Ukrainian friends and partners are facing as we speak. And this is what we must prepare for too. First, because we cannot rule out the risk of spillovers to our single market, to our member states, and to our own security systems. For instance, a targeted cyber attack carried out against the Viasat satellite-based internet access provider, which was presumably aimed at disrupting communications of the Ukrainian military, had repercussions on nearly 30,000 satellite terminals across Europe, from internet services in France to the administration of wind turbines in Germany. And in the hours following Russia's territorial aggression against Ukraine, some European countries in the neighborhood saw a significant increase in the number of cyber attacks targeting their critical infrastructures. Let me recall a word of caution here. We must be very careful and not fall into the trap of hasty analysis or overinterpretation. However, at the same time, we must also not be naive and unprepared either. The era of innocence for Europe is over. These attacks are only the tip of an iceberg. Below the surface and outside the media spotlight, there has been a particularly worrying and growing ground shell of cyber threats starting even much before the war in Ukraine. Over the last years, member states have been hit by a series of large-scale cyber attacks by malicious actors. This summer, it was the Irish health system that was paralyzed by a cyber attack. Then, a ransomware attack against a software company and its customers led to the countrywide closure of a major supermarket chain in Sweden. In January, oil suppliers in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany were targeted. And last month, a major telecommunications operator in Portugal. All this was not war-related, and brings me to my second point. Our union is built on the single market where everything is interlinked and interconnected, thanks to our digital transformation, which is now ongoing. But this, at the same time, means that everything can be a target. And when cyber attacks hit infrastructures that are critical to the functioning of our economies and of our societies, they do not only disrupt our networks, they directly put at risk the lives of people. The European Union stands at a crossroads, at a defining moment. I strongly believe that our union is being born, that a new union is being born out of the war in the past days. A new Europe that is ready and capable of mobilizing at the means at our disposal all its strike force to defend the values and the principles we stand for, our model of society that represents us. For the first time, we are using the European budget, EU money, to purchase and deliver military equipment to a country that is under attack. Earlier this week, the Council adopted the Strategic Compass. This document is not an answer to the latest international developments, but a long-term commitment to increase the strength of our union as a security provider, and a resounding message of unity and determination that we're sending to those who portray us as weak and divided. This also means one thing for cyber. We need to take cybersecurity out of its tech silo and put it at the core of our national security and defense. Cybersecurity is no longer an issue for industry. Cybersecurity is an issue of society. To shield our economies and our societies against these threats, we need to be prepared, to be resilient, and to be able to respond. First thing we need to do is preparedness. We must shield the most critical sectors of our internal market, both physically and digitally, in a seamless way. This is where our twin legislative proposals, the NIS2 and the CIR directives, come in. I know you will discuss this in more detail in the next panel, but let me stress one thing. These directives are two sides of the same coin, our security against threats of all kinds. That is why these legislative texts, currently being negotiated by the co-legislators, must be adopted as quickly as possible, with the same level of ambition we proposed them and the wider scope we envisaged. And I'm confident that the French presidency will be able to adopt them soon, and I'm also confident and hopeful that this adoption will be a simultaneous one that will cover at the same time NIS2 and the Critical Entities Resilience Directive. We need this as a package, because packaging this legislation also in a way in itself sends a very strong message. Second thing we need to do, resilience. We will only be able to shield our market and our society if we ensure security by design in the digital products and companies and consumers rely on, in their daily lives, on branded, recognizable, security-proven products. Those products that are most often the loophole through which malicious actors rush to breach us. This is where we need to concentrate. These are the walls that we need to build. This is about safety, and at the same time is also about trust. For this, we need to put in place horizontal cybersecurity requirements, common standards. This is the ambition of the Cyber Resilience Act that we will be presenting at the end of this year, but you can already contribute to its success by participating in the online public consultation which we launched last week. Third and last strand of work, response. I was in Athens last week for the inauguration of the new headquarters of our Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA, and with its executive director, Johan Lepassar, who will address you later today. We stressed the importance for the EU and for our member states to be able to respond firmly in a united and coordinated way to cyber threats, to speak and act with one single European voice. Imagine a large-scale cyber attack that hits simultaneously one or more strategic sectors at the same time in several places across the EU. If we do not already have this culture of sharing information, analysis, and expertise between member states, but also across the different cyber communities, we have no chance of winning the battle against those who want to shatter our unity and solidarity. So we need these processes and these reflexes that compel us to act together and quickly. In this kind of situation, time is of the essence, and the smallest piece of information can be decisive for the overall response. And this is why we need this to be done at EU level. We need a structure that brings together our best cybersecurity experts and response teams from the defense, civilian, diplomatic, and law enforcement communities. And we need these people to talk to each other and to work together and coordinate our action at operational level. I know this is not easy because many of these communities, many of these constituencies are made of a material that compels them not to talk to each other. And very often, they do not talk to each other even within our member states. This is the deficit of trust that we need to fill. This is the difficulty, a structural difficulty that we need to overcome. And this is where our initiative to create a joint cyber unit has a place in our security ecosystem. and we need to advance its operationalization urgently. Was one of the most emblematic proposals in cybersecurity that President von der Leyen had presented already in July 2019 in her programmatic speech to the European Parliament. No one can win the cyber battle alone. We can only win it together. Dear friends, the crisis in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, crisis, I think it's an euphemism at this stage. The war in Ukraine, this senseless, illogical war, is a major wake-up call for our security and our defense. Now is the time for us to take bold steps in cybersecurity, in security union infrastructure, to make sure that we are prepared, resilient, and capable of responding to these aggressions. Working together, we will ensure that cybersecurity becomes another vital component of our union's protective shield. This is what Emmanuel Macron, in his famous Sorbonne speech, had called for. He said that Europeans, average Europeans, need to understand, need to feel that there is something that we can call l'Europe qui protège, a Europe that protects. And in these times, cybersecurity is at the heart of this call for a Europe that protects. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Margaritis. I know you don't have very much time, but I'm going to quickly ask you a couple of questions. Today we'll be just discussing most today policy, but I want to talk to you briefly about politics. Your speech was very, very impressive. You talked about the era of innocence in Europe is over. So this grim anniversary today, the war, as you say, is not a crisis, a war, is now a month old. From your vantage point inside the Commission, when von der Leyen became president, she was frankly derided by many people when she claimed it was going to be a geopolitical commission. And people were not terribly clear what that meant in practice. In the past month, can you give a sense of how, first of all, the Commission has changed in its outlook about addressing the geopolitics of the situation we now find ourselves in?
Let me start by saying that when the European Council appointed Ursula von der Leyen as president of the Commission, they must have known something. They must have known that we had to face a pandemic and then a war. So they chose a politician who is at the time a medical doctor and a former defense minister. I'm saying it's not as a joke.
No.
Actually, I mean it. Because there were two Rubicon moments in these 2 years and a half. I think I can share with you in the intimacy of this beautiful room. Both Rubicon moments, there was a certain sense of history in the making in this commission. The first was the moment when we decided to purchase vaccines as a union. And a few weeks later, to put forward the recovery plan. We were all cautious that this was a moment where you call it a geopolitical Europe, others call it a Europe of results. It was the moment where Europe stopped thinking or reflecting or analyzing, but taking risks, bold measures, acting. And this is the second Rubicon moment now. This last month, the things that we managed to produce are unthinkable. I'm not talking about the 4 packages of sanctions that have been prepared in record time and coordinated across our Western and NATO partners, from Canada to Switzerland. I can not mention this blanket protection security guarantee, the humanitarian visa that we provided for the millions of Ukrainians fleeing the war, that gives them blanket, immediate and unconditional access to our health, education, job market and residence permits. That's also for the first time in history. For the first time, we activated the so-called peace facility, which is taxpayers' money, EU money, to purchase military equipment and send it to Ukraine. And I have no doubt in my mind that sooner rather than later, and the strategic compass is the route to get us there, we will see first a European Rapid Reaction Force that can be dispatched to act on behalf of the Union, and we will also complete our defenses in the homeland security part and strategic autonomy. So this is happening. It's happening, and it has nothing to do with announcements. You know, I can very easily announce anything that can cross my mind, provided that someone buys it. It's not enough. We have to deliver on an announcement. And this commission has, I think, delivered in these 2 years and a half of our mandate, because history is an accelerator for policy. And I'm very proud, personally, of being part of this team.
Okay. A second and final question, Margarita, is member states. You said that Europe has to act in a united and coordinated way with one European voice, but you also acknowledge that member states aren't used to talking with each other, and also inside some of the stakeholders, agencies inside each member state don't necessarily have the reflex or the tradition of speaking and talking to each other more than they might. How confident are you now, given the grim reality of this war, that this has been, to use a cliche phrase, forgive me, a wake-up call for the heads of government to act in a much more concerted way in the future?
Yes, I do not live in an exoplanet. I live in real life, and I have spent 30 years of my life in the meanders of European politics, so I know how difficult it is to sort of bring everybody on board. And when it comes to security, I mean, you are all experts. You know how these security ecosystems operate at national level. Security and intelligence ecosystems are crafted in a way which is very self-sufficient, you know. Military people don't talk to diplomats. And diplomats don't talk to politicians. And there's very few ways of interlinking all this. And if you add the EU layer on top, that's even more complicated. So how do we go beyond that? First of all, I'm very encouraged by I think the right word would be chemistry, the personal chemistry that binds together the current constellation of EU leaders. The European Council, which will meet in a few hours, in its setting is a unique place. It's the ultimate power hub. We have 27 heads of state and government, the 3 leaders of the institutions, and that's it. They are just them. No ambassadors, no advisors, no ministers. And they, through the pressure that they have been feeling, through the external atmospherics, so all the constraints that push them to deliver, they have come very close together. And some of the spectacular things that have been decided and enacted, that was precisely because at the top now, we have much better coordination and understanding than we still have in certain sectoral constituencies. Many times ministers are more reluctant, patriotic than the bosses. The bosses see each other eye to eye, and so that's
Okay.
a hopeful sign. Another hopeful sign is that the demand, the expectations by ordinary people are intensifying to Europe to deliver. People do not care that much about competence, Brussels politics, legalese and commissionees. They simply don't care. When I go back to Greece, in my hometown, in my place, people say, what is Europe doing about that?
Yeah.
And you cannot tell them, we do not have a sufficient legal base, a strong legal basis on health in the treaty. and say, we don't care, do it. And that's why we did it. we on the pandemic, for example, we exhausted every inch of our competence to buy vaccines, to do the certificate, to do the recovery fund. Same thing will happen, I'm convinced, with security, defense, strategic autonomy. This is the new big thing, and it's happening already.
Okay. We'll let you go, Margaritis. You have many things to do, and we need to move on, and you have a lot to do today, like any other day of your working life. Thank you
so
very much for your time.
Thank you. That was the most pleasant moment of my day. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Vice President, for Major Challenges, your new title as of today. We're now going to welcome, hopefully, if he's been waiting patiently for us online, Johan, good morning. Johan Lapasa, Executive Director of ENISA. Are you speaking to us from your brand new office in Athens, Johan? Is that where you're speaking from?
Indeed. And apologies for not being in Brussels, but as the Vice President said, we just opened the new headquarters, so I have to be here. And actually, in times of crisis and war, it's important that people are together.
Well, they look very nice premises. I saw them on social media, the photographs of the exterior, maybe not the interior. We're going to give you the floor right now, Johan, and hopefully if we have time afterwards, I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you. But first of all, my thanks to you on behalf of my colleagues and everybody taking part in this conference for you making the time this morning. You're also a very busy chap. And without further ado, you have the floor, Johan.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I think it was the second time I addressed this August platform. So, and it's important that we do discuss cybersecurity, not only at the strategic level, but also look at the technicalities behind it. The Vice President has highlighted the direction Europe needs to take and where some of the cyber and security opportunities and challenges lie. As the Union's Agency for Cybersecurity, our broader role is to raise the common level of cybersecurity across the EU, bring together the various cybersecurity communities. And we do that in a variety of ways, ranging from raising the capacity of the sectors, the critical sectors, organizing cyber exercises and trainings, through proposing EU-wide cybersecurity certification schemes that help to bring about trustworthy products and services in the internal market, right to the awareness raising. But of course, now the immediate and urgent challenge that we face during this war is to understand what is the situation in the cyberspace and how can we rapidly increase the resilience of the critical sector players to any kind of threats that this war might pose. So let me reinforce some of the points made by the Vice President in zooming in on the importance of the common situational awareness, as well as strengthening our critical infrastructures. Since the start of Russian military aggression, there has been a notable increase of incidents, as well as expansion of scope in terms of sectors affected within Ukraine, as well as in Russia and Belarus, including information operations, increased activities of hacktivists supporting the parties, as well as cyber operations to support kinetic attacks. With some exceptions, we have not seen a major escalation or spillover to Union cyberspace yet. As the Vice President notes, an attack against satellite military communication in Ukraine, which started on the day the Russian invasion began, spilled over and caused a cascading effect on European satellite network provider that relies on such communication channel. It affected tens of thousands of terminals in at least 20 countries across Europe, with 70,000 customers cut off from internet in 6 member states. So this will not stand out in the future as an isolated case. Again, as the Vice President notices, we cannot remain naive. Having a cross-sector and real-time overview and a common situational awareness ensures that not only at the national level, but increasingly at the European level, we can lay out bridges and create a understanding what is going on across the technical and political levels. For that to happen, we need to ensure that the more technical cybersecurity communities in national cybersecurity incident response teams, the cooperation networks in charge of cyber crisis management across member states, such as CyCLUB, and the EU institutions have the capabilities, the trust, and the communication channels to work together, to provide our political leadership with the right intelligence at the right time, to assess the impact of attacks and respond to these. We already know that attacks by state threat actors are not only likely to grow, but also will become more dangerous. At the level of EU institutions, we also are working with all actors, together with CERT-EU, for example. We recently issued recommendations how public and private organizations can boost their cyber resilience. Even without the link to the invasion of Ukraine, we are seeing critical infrastructure sectors being targeted by increasingly professionalized ransomware groups. For example, recently in the energy sector, affecting several terminal operating companies in 3 member states or around airport management companies. These cannot be categorized easily as spillovers. They flag fragility in various sectors, which should point at an urgent need to raise preparedness and resilience. This fits into the picture which ENISA collects and sees annually under the current Network Information Security Directive, covering telecom, energy, transport, finance, health, drinking water sectors, also digital infrastructure and digital service providers. We are seeing persistent high level of incidents, increasing level of incidents and attacks targeting more mature sectors such as banking and telecoms, and more worrying, less mature sectors such as the health sector. In 2020, some 913 large-scale impactful incidents were notified, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. 742 came from critical sectors, with 262 related to the health sector, 171 from the telecom sector, 124 from the banking sector, 95 for digital infrastructure, 90 for the energy sector. Similar numbers are expected for 2021, and the report will be published soon. But we do not have the complete picture, and without this, we are more vulnerable. The new revision of the Network Information Security Directive and the expansion of incident notification requirements or risk assessments to 10 essential entities in sectors such as space and public administration, and 6 important entities such as postal services and chemicals will help us to complete the picture. Less mature sectors will also be under the scope of the Network Information Security Directive and will need to speed up. In terms of getting through European legislation, the adoption of the revised directive, still under the current French presidency, will be a great achievement. But adoption is only the first step, and we'll need to make sure to ensure a rapid and consistent implementation throughout the Union. The weakest link in this case will be the closest targets. We also need to support more ambitious proposals regarding vulnerability disclosure, provisions for more supply chain security and coordinating cybersecurity risk assessments, beefing up the work with critical sectors by creating the right environment for essential and important entities to share cybersecurity relevant information, such as cyber threats, vulnerabilities, ransomware incidents, indicators of compromise, tactics, techniques, and procedures, cybersecurity alerts, and configuration tools. Here, security operational centers, or SOCs, play a key role in monitoring, detecting, and mitigating these threats. SOCs are present in many critical sectors, and the number of managed security service providers offering their services in the EU is constantly increasing. However, Europe needs to invest more in connecting SOCs across sectors and across borders to ensure that we have the right systems in place to share critical information in a timely manner, develop SOCs in sectors that are overlooked, and establish an appropriate level of maturity in SOCs across the EU. This is the vision that Commissioner Breton has put in place in the recent cybersecurity strategy for the Union, which the agency fully supports. Dependencies among sectors will grow, such as those between energy and telecom sectors, and sectors will need to work together. The role of the telecom sector to act as a shield to less mature sectors with medium to low maturity cannot be understated. Finally, cybersecurity needs a clear investment policy across different sectors. We've looked into the investments of our critical operators in 2020, also last year. And what it showed is that EU essential service providers invest on average 40% less than their US counterparts. This cannot remain. If being cybersecure is a value, and if we look at the budget of our critical operators and essential service providers, they do not seem to value so much the investments that are needed in order to create cybersecurity. This has to change, and I hope that this forum can act as a catalyst for change. Thank you very much.
Johan, goodness me. It's quite a stark picture you lay out for us there. Let me take you up. We have time for a couple of questions from me, Johan, if you wouldn't mind, very briefly. Let me take you up on your last point. Cybersecurity needs a clear investment policy. Maybe the subtext to your point is that member states still need convincing about the scale of the cybersecurity threat. Otherwise, it'd be a no-brainer. Why? How optimistic are you that this new prise de conscience about more investment will happen? What needs to be in place for member states, either individually or collectively at EU level, to make the kind of investment that you say urgently needed?
Well, I think if we look at the framework, the elements are already there at the union level, and also we see encouraging signs in some of the member states where, for example, Germany has mandated that at least 14% of the investments that go to digitalizing their health sector must be dedicated to cybersecurity, to maintain the security of these digital investments. Also at the European level with the recent recovery packages, there have been a push to direct investments towards cybersecurity, to information security. But this needs to be also responded by appropriate private sector policies. And I think this is something that we don't yet see. We don't see medium-sized, let's say, critical entities taking up cybersecurity investments. The Vice President mentioned the let's say the Irish ransomware attack against the health sector. The problem wasn't really, if you look at the cybersecurity entities in Ireland, they did their job in a remarkably manner in a very difficult circumstances. But they cannot do the job of the hospitals. And of course, the hospitals need incentives to invest in cybersecurity because that's not their first priority. Their first priority is always going to be to cure people. And that's understandable. So they need some help and understanding what and where and at what level the investment is required in order to make them more cybersecure and resilient. And this is something where national governments can help by building the right regulatory environment around investments.
Okay. And a second and final question, Johan. Obviously, people here in Brussels, institutions in charge of the policy, the strategy, the consultations we've heard about from Margaritis a few minutes ago. And you're in charge of the actual the implementation, the actual making concrete some of these policy initiatives that initiate here in Brussels. You touched on the private sector. How would you characterize, how would you describe the relationship, the working relationship between agencies like your own and the private sector? You cannot obviously work without them, but what level of cooperation do you see, and how, if necessary, it could be even further improved in the future?
Well, first of all, there is a close cooperation and coordination between my agency and also the sectors. Since the beginning of this year, actually, before we ran a series of consultations with all the critical sectors at the European level. And I really want to thank them for not only for reaching out to us, but being there and being a partner for cybersecurity institutions, not at the European level only, but also at the national level. So we are now launching the second round of consultations. And of course, this is necessary not only to exchange information regarding situational awareness and having a common understanding of the picture that is going on, but also to see how the agency can help to build resilience across these different sectors. I think the partnership is still very nascent. Sectors find it difficult to cooperate with each other, somewhat also in between themselves, because of course, they are also competitors. So we need to find this way how information between entities and across different sectors can be exchanged in a manner that does not hurt the information provider. And I think this is something that is still not yet fully fixed. There can be intermediaries, and in national context, I think oftentimes the national cybersecurity incident response team, they act as intermediaries, but also in private sector context, I think the SOCs, the security operations centers, can act as intermediaries. And this is something that I think is a new stepping stone for us to push at the European level. I just want to correct you in one sentence. We don't implement directly. We help member states to implement. So we are there to help the member states, and they've done a good job. I have to recall that the Network Information Security Directive, which was agreed in 2016, only came into force 2018. So we've only had a European framework for cybersecurity around for a bit more than 4 years. Let's say in European timescale, the progress that we made together with the member states and with the sectors is in light speed, I would say. Yeah. But of course, our adversaries move quicker, and this is something that we need to also take into account. We need to move even quicker in order to maintain the capacities and resilience that we have now. In order to increase it, we have to increase the pace. Sorry.
Okay, well, we have to leave it there. Johan, thank you again very much for your time. I look forward to seeing you when you come to Brussels. Thank you again, Johan. Good morning. Right, moving rapidly on, I now go over my place as moderator to the moderator of session 1, which is called A Modernized Framework to Secure the Digital and Interconnected European Economy. And I invite the moderator and all the panelists to come on stage. Thank you again.